Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're dropping you into the coldest inhabited place on Earth, where the thermometer doesn't just dip below freezing, it practically gives up and goes home. We're talking about Yakutia, Siberia, where winter temperatures routinely hit minus 71 degrees Celsius. That's minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends. A cold so profound that it fundamentally changes the rules of survival. Your spit freezes before it hits the ground. Your eyelashes frost together when you blink. Steel becomes as brittle as pottery, and exposed skin gets frostbite in under 2 minutes. This isn't a camping trip, this is your body versus physics, and physics has a much better track record. You probably won't survive this, statistically speaking. But tonight we're gonna walk through it anyway, step by cold, miserable step, because there's something oddly soothing about learning how humans can endure the absolute worst our planet has to offer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how this channel reaches people in every time zone, whether you're winding down in Tokyo or trying not to fall asleep at your desk in Toronto. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Yakutia in mid-January, though standing might be generous. You're more like existing in a landscape that wants you dead. The sun, if you can call it that, barely crests the horizon for about 3 hours a day, giving everything a perpetual twilight quality that messes with your circadian rhythm something fierce. The sky is that peculiar shade of deep purple blue that only happens in extreme cold, and the air itself seems to shimmer and distort as moisture flash freezes into suspended ice crystals. You exhale, and the moisture from your lungs instantly transforms into a cloud of ice fog that hangs in front of your face before slowly drifting downward. It's called the Whisper of the Stars by the native Saka people, which is poetic until you realize it's literally your breath trying to kill you by blocking your vision. The silence is the first thing that really gets you. In this cold, sound travels differently. Muted, deadened, like the world is wrapped in cotton. There are no birds, no insects, no rustling leaves because the trees themselves are frozen solid. Their sap turned to ice inside the bark. When you move, your clothing makes a strange crinkling sound as the fabric stiffens and the moisture from your body heat freezes into the outer layers. You're wearing multiple layers, obviously. You're not an idiot, but already you can feel the cold probing for weaknesses, searching for any gap between your collar and your neck, any place where 2 layers don't quite overlap. Here's something they don't tell you in survival guides. At minus 71 degrees Celsius, metal becomes your enemy in ways you haven't imagined. That zipper on your jacket? Touch it with bare skin and you'll leave flesh behind. Your belt buckle is a circle of frozen agony against your hip. Even the metal frames of your glasses, if you're wearing them, conduct cold directly into the bones of your skull, giving you an ice cream headache that never ends. The indigenous Saka people learned this lesson centuries ago. Traditional Yakutian clothing uses leather ties, bone toggles, and fur fastenings exclusively. No metal touches skin, ever. You've got maybe an hour, 2 if you're lucky, before your core temperature starts dropping to dangerous levels despite your layers. The cold is already working on you, your fingers and toes are going numb, not because they're frostbitten yet, but because your body is smart enough to start restricting blood flow to your extremities to protect your vital organs. It's a losing game though. Without shelter, without fire, you're just a slowly cooling bag of meat in the world's largest freezer. Your body is burning calories at an astronomical rate just trying to maintain 37 degrees Celsius in a minus 71 degrees Celsius environment. That's a 108-degree difference. Your metabolism is in overdrive, your heart is pumping hard, and you're going to need somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 calories per day just to maintain your body weight in these conditions. Hope you had a big breakfast. The landscape around you is otherworldly. You're in the taiga, the boreal forest that covers most of Siberia, but in deep winter it looks more like the surface of an alien planet. The trees are primarily Dahurian larch, one of the only deciduous conifers, which drops its needles in winter as a survival strategy. Smart tree. The bare branches are coated in hoarfrost so thick that each twig looks like it's been dipped in white chocolate. Snow covers everything in undulating drifts that hide the true contours of the land. In some places, it's knee-deep. In others, wind-scoured patches reveal the brown grass and frozen earth beneath. You need shelter, and you need it within the hour. Not a tent, fabric shelter is basically useless at these temperatures, offering minimal protection and no thermal mass. What you need is something the Arctic peoples have known for millennia. You need to work with the cold, use it as a building material, turn the very thing trying to kill you into the thing that saves you. You need to build a snow shelter, and you need to build it with nothing but your hands, maybe a stick or two, and whatever natural materials you can scavenge. No modern tools.
No kumbanien tarp.
Just you, the snow, and the rapidly approaching night when temperatures will drop even further. First, you need to understand what you're working with. Snow in Yakutia isn't like snow in, say, Colorado or Switzerland. This is cold weather snow, dry, powdery, crystalline. Each snowflake is a perfect six-sided crystal. Yes, that's actually true, not a myth. And in extreme cold, these crystals don't bond together well. This snow squeaks under your boots, a distinctive sound caused by the crystals fracturing as you compress them. For building purposes, this is both good and bad. Bad because loose powder doesn't stack or pack well initially. Good because once you compress it properly, the crystals fracture and refreeze into a solid, strong matrix that's surprisingly sturdy. You start walking, scanning for the right spot. Location is everything. Build in the wrong place and you'll either freeze from wind exposure or suffocate from carbon dioxide pooling in a depression. The indigenous Saka and the various northern peoples, the Evenks, the Yukagirs, they've been surviving here for thousands of years, and they have rules about where to shelter. You need protection from wind, but not a completely enclosed valley where cold air settles and stagnates. You need to be near fuel, dead wood for burning, but not under heavy-laden branches that might dump snow on you or, worse, have trees that could fall in the wind. You need firm ground, not frozen swamp, because melting ice under your shelter means you're sleeping in a puddle, and a wet sleeping bag at minus 71 degrees Celsius is a death sentence. There's a slight rise ahead, maybe 15 meters away, where a cluster of large trees creates a natural windbreak. The wind here is blowing from the north. It's always blowing from the north in Yakutia winter, and those trees will block the worst of it. You trudge toward it, each step an effort as your boots sink into the snow. Your legs are already burning from the exertion, which is good. The muscle activity generates heat. But you're also breathing hard, and each breath draws that minus 71 degrees Celsius air into your lungs, chilling you from the inside. You've wrapped a scarf around your face, breathing through the fabric to pre-warm the air, but already the scarf is crusted with ice from your exhalations. It's like wearing a frozen washcloth. You reach the spot and assess it with new eyes, survivor's eyes. The snow here is deeper, which is good, more building material. The trees block the north wind but are spaced enough that you won't have branches overhead. There's deadfall nearby, branches that have snapped in previous storms, potential fuel if you can get a fire going. Most importantly, the ground slopes just slightly, enough that cold air will flow past rather than pooling here. It's not perfect, but perfect doesn't exist at minus 71 degrees Celsius. This will do. Now comes the hard part. You need to start building before your body heat fades and your fingers become useless blocks of frozen meat. Historians still argue whether snow shelters originated with one particular culture or emerged independently across Arctic regions. But the evidence suggests that every human population that encountered serious snow eventually figured out the same basic truth. Snow is an excellent insulator. Air trapped between snow crystals creates tiny pockets that prevent heat transfer. A properly built snow shelter can maintain an interior temperature of around minus 5 degrees Celsius to 0 degrees Celsius, even when it's minus 71 degrees Celsius outside. That 70-degree difference is the gap between dying of hypothermia and actually surviving the night. You kneel in the snow, which immediately soaks cold through the knees of your pants, and begin the work. Your hands are still in gloves. You're not stupid enough to go barehanded yet. And you start by digging, scooping snow toward you, piling it up. The work is hard. The cold makes everything harder because your muscles don't respond quite right when they're cold, and your joints feel stiff. But you keep moving because moving generates heat, and heat is life. You scoop and pile, building up a mound of snow in front of the rise. This will be your shelter's foundation. Not a hole dug down into the snow, but a raised mound that you'll hollow out, because warm air rises and you want to sleep above the level of cold air pooling at ground level. 10 minutes in, you're actually sweating under your layers, which is dangerous. Sweat in the Arctic is a death sentence. It wets your clothing, reduces insulation, and will freeze solid once you stop moving. You slow down slightly, trying to work hard enough to stay warm, but not so hard that you overheat. It's a delicate balance, and one that every Arctic explorer throughout history has struggled with. Robert Peary's expedition to the North Pole in 1909 lost several men not to frostbite directly, but to sweating during exertion and then freezing when they stopped. Your mound is growing. You're building it against the natural rise, using the land's contour to save effort. The snow is piling up, a heap of white about 1 meter high and 2 meters long so far. You need it bigger, big enough that when you hollow it out, there's still a thick wall of snow insulation between you and the outside. You're aiming for walls at least 30 centimeters thick, preferably more. Every shovelful of snow, scooped with your gloved hands, since you don't have a shovel, is effort, is calories, is time. The sun, already weak, is starting its early descent toward the horizon. You've got maybe 90 minutes of usable daylight left. After that, you'll be working in the dark, and trust me, trying to build an emergency shelter in the dark at minus 71 degrees Celsius is not an experience you want. The pile is now waist-high, chest-high, a substantial mound of compressed snow. You've been packing it as you go, pressing and compressing with your whole body weight, because loose snow is useless. You need density. You need structure. Here's a quirky fact from Inuit traditional knowledge. Some builders would mark how thick the walls should be by pushing sticks through the mound from the outside as they built up the pile. When you hollow out the interior later, you stop digging when you see the tips of the sticks, ensuring uniform wall thickness. You don't have sticks prepared, but it's something to remember. Your hands are starting to hurt. That deep ache that comes before numbness. You flex them, make fists, shove them into your armpits for a moment to warm them. When you pull them out, steam rises from your armpits, your body heat escaping into the cold air. You can't afford to keep losing heat like this, but you also can't stop working. The shelter isn't done. You're not even close to done. And the cold is patient. It doesn't tire. It doesn't need to rest. It just waits for you to make a mistake, to stop moving for too long, to let your guard down for just a moment. But you're not done yet. You've got the mound. Now comes the delicate part, hollowing it out without collapsing the whole thing on yourself. That's next. For now, you take a breath, the cold air searing your lungs even through the scarf, and prepare for the next phase. Because in Yakutia, at minus 71 degrees Celsius, there is no pause button. There's only keep moving or die. And you're not ready to die just yet. You step back from your snow mound and force yourself to pause, just for 30 seconds, to actually look at what the environment is telling you. This is the part survival instructors always emphasize, but nobody really internalizes until they're actually freezing. The landscape speaks in Yakutia, and if you don't learn its language, you won't make it through the night. Every visual cue, every subtle change in the air, every weird phenomenon you're seeing, they're all data points that mean the difference between waking up tomorrow and becoming a cautionary tale. The ice fog is getting thicker. You've been so focused on your mound that you didn't notice at first, but now you realize visibility is dropping. Ice fog, or diamond dust as some people romantically call it, forms when the air temperature drops so low that whatever minimal moisture exists instantly crystallizes into suspended ice crystals. It's not really fog in the meteorological sense. It's more like breathing inside a snow globe. Each tiny crystal catches what little light remains, creating an ethereal, almost magical shimmer in the air. It's beautiful in the way that things which can kill you often are. The Saka have multiple words for different types of ice fog, distinguishing between the relatively harmless shimmer you get at minus 50 degrees Celsius and the thick, vision-obscuring soup that forms below minus 65 degrees Celsius. You're definitely in the latter category now. Here's what ice fog tells you. The temperature is still dropping. As the sun descends, and it's already more than halfway to the horizon, the already brutal cold is about to get worse. Much worse. Nighttime temperatures in Yakutia regularly drop 10 to 15 degrees below daytime highs, which means you could be looking at minus 80 degrees Celsius or lower before morning. At those temperatures, weird things happen. Scientists in Yakutsk have documented what they call cold fracturing. The sound of trees literally cracking as the sap inside them freezes and expands. It sounds like gunshots echoing through the forest, sharp cracks that'll wake you from sleep if you're lucky enough to fall asleep at all. You scan the horizon, what little of it you can see through the fog. The trees are your thermometers here. Large trees, Larix gmelinii if you want to get technical, have evolved specifically for this environment, and they show you what you're dealing with. The thicker the hoarfrost coating on the windward side of the trunks, the colder it's been and the more moisture is freezing out of the air. You can actually estimate temperature by frost thickness if you know what you're looking for. Anything over a centimeter of rime ice means you're below -60 degrees Celsius. The trees in front of you have frost deposits at least 2 or 3 centimeters thick, built up over days or weeks of sustained extreme cold. Some of the deposits have that eerie, feathery structure that forms when supercooled fog droplets freeze on contact, a phenomenon called rime accretion. But there's something else you need to check, something more immediate and dangerous. Wind. In flat, open tundra, wind at these temperatures is instantly lethal. Wind chill becomes almost meaningless because the numbers just get absurd. But you're in the forest, which offers some protection. Still, you need to know what you're dealing with. You pick up a handful of the dry, powdery snow and toss it into the air, watching how it disperses. There's a light breeze, maybe 5 to 10 kilometers per hour, coming from the north-northeast. Not too bad. You can work with that. If wind speeds pick up to 20 or 30 kilometers per hour, your effective temperature could drop another 10 or 15 degrees, and that's game over. Your shelter needs to account for wind direction. The entrance has to face away from prevailing winds, and you need to build a wind block or baffle at the entry. Now you do something that feels counterintuitive. You take off one glove for just a moment and hold your bare hand up toward your face, palm out. The cold hits your exposed skin like a physical blow, a sharp, stabbing pain that intensifies every second. You count 1, 2, 3. By 5 seconds your fingers are going numb. By 10 seconds you can't feel them at all. You shove your hand back into the glove immediately, then into your armpit, waiting for the painful tingling as sensation returns. This little experiment tells you something crucial. You've got about 10 seconds of bare hand dexterity for any task that requires it. Need to tie a knot? 10 seconds. Need to manipulate something small? 10 seconds. After that, your fingers become useless clubs and frostbite starts setting in. Experienced Arctic workers know this intimately. They'll take off gloves, perform a task with intense focus, then re-glove immediately. It's a dance with tissue damage. Historians still argue whether the indigenous peoples of Siberia had a more accurate understanding of cold weather indicators than modern meteorological science, but there's substantial evidence they could predict temperature drops and weather changes with uncanny accuracy just by reading environmental signs. The Evenk people, nomadic reindeer herders who range across Siberia, traditionally observed animal behavior, ice crystal formations, and even the sound quality of the air to forecast conditions. There's a phenomenon they called ice talking, a peculiar creaking, groaning sound that large expanses of frozen rivers and lakes make when the ice contracts in extreme cold. When you hear ice talking, you know you're in for a brutal night. You turn your attention to your immediate surroundings, specifically looking for what the cold has done to everyday reality. There's a fascination in how extreme cold breaks the normal rules. You notice a fallen branch nearby and walk over to it. It's a large limb, maybe 3 centimeters in diameter, dead and dry. You pick it up and bend it. Instead of flexing, it snaps with a sharp crack, the break so clean it looks like it was cut with a saw. Wood loses elasticity in extreme cold. The moisture in the cells freezes, the lignin becomes brittle, and what should bend instead shatters. This is actually useful information for you. It means collecting firewood will be easier, dead branches snap cleanly, but it also means any wooden tool you try to fashion might break at the worst possible moment. You look at the snow itself more carefully, reading its texture and structure. Not all snow is created equal, and in Yakutia, understanding snow types is crucial. What you're dealing with is predominantly depth hoar, large, faceted crystals that form in the snowpack when there's a strong temperature gradient between the ground and the surface. Depth hoar is terrible for avalanche stability, it creates weak layers. But for shelter building, it's actually workable once you compress it properly. The crystals are big enough that you can see their structure with the naked eye, hexagonal plates and columns, nature's geometry on display. These crystals will break under pressure but then refreeze and sinter together, forming a solid mass. Near your chosen shelter site, you notice something odd. A small depression in the snow where something has melted and refrozen. You investigate and realize it's a urine spot, likely from a fox or another small mammal. The urine melted through the snow initially, because even at body temperature, liquid can melt frozen water, then refroze into a yellowish ice patch. This tells you wildlife is active in the area, which is actually good news. Animals mean there's food available somewhere, and their presence indicates the area isn't completely uninhabitable. The Arctic fox, Vulpes lagopus, can survive temperatures down to -70 degrees Celsius thanks to the most efficient insulation system in the animal kingdom. Fur so dense that they have 20,000 hairs per square centimeter. You have maybe a tenth of that even with your artificial clothing layers. Here's something you probably haven't thought about. Sound as a temperature indicator. In extreme cold, sound travels differently. The air is denser, and sound waves propagate faster and clearer. If you shout, your voice carries further but also sounds strange, flatter, with less resonance. The indigenous peoples used this. A hunter could estimate temperature by how far his voice carried or by the quality of sounds from his footsteps on frozen snow. At -30 degrees Celsius, snow makes a crunching sound. At -50 degrees Celsius, it squeaks. At -70 degrees Celsius, each footstep produces an almost musical chirp, high-pitched and distinctive. You listen to your own footsteps now. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Yep, you're definitely in the -70 degrees Celsius range. Congratulations, you're in one of the coldest environments a human can experience without specialized equipment. You need to assess your own body's signals too. This is the part people forget. You are also part of the environment, a warm biological system trying to exist in conditions that want to bring you to thermodynamic equilibrium with everything else. In other words, the universe wants you at -71 degrees Celsius, and it's working very hard to make that happen. You take stock. Toes still have sensation, good. Fingers hurt, but still work, good. Face is numb but not frozen, acceptable. Chest feels tight from breathing cold air, manageable. Your body is going through what physiologists call cold stress response. Your blood vessels are constricting to reduce heat loss, your metabolism is ramping up, and your body is starting to shiver. Not the visible shaking kind yet, but micro-shivers, tiny muscle contractions that generate heat. The light is fading fast now. The sun is a weak, pale disk just above the horizon, and the sky has taken on that deep purple indigo color that precedes Arctic night. You've got maybe 45 minutes before full darkness, and you need to make them count. But before you get back to building, you do one more scan of the area, looking for dangers you might have missed. Dead trees that could fall? None immediately overhead. Snow cornices that could collapse? Not applicable in forest. Animals? Unlikely. Wolves stay away from human activity, and the Siberian tiger's range doesn't extend this far north. The main danger is the cold itself and your own mistakes. You notice your breath cloud is hanging in the air longer now, not dispersing as quickly. Another sign, decreasing wind, which is both good and bad. Good because wind makes cold exponentially more dangerous. Bad because still air can create temperature inversions where cold air pools in low spots, making them death traps. Your chosen site on a slight rise should avoid the worst of it. There's a particular phenomenon you're watching for that hasn't happened yet, and you're grateful. At extreme temperatures, sometimes you'll see what's called sundogs or parhelia, bright spots that appear beside the sun caused by ice crystals refracting light. They're beautiful and also a reliable sign that you're in air cold enough to keep ice crystals suspended indefinitely. If you see sundogs forming, you know you're dealing with at least -40 degrees Celsius and often much colder. They're like the universe showing off, reminding you that even in these killing conditions, physics can produce moments of beauty. You also check the quality of the ice fog at ground level. If it's pooling and thickening near the ground, that's a sign of extreme temperature and low wind, conditions where carbon monoxide from a fire could accumulate to dangerous levels in an enclosed space. It's something to remember for later when you're attempting to get a fire going. Ventilation isn't optional in a snow shelter. It's absolutely critical. People have died not from freezing but from suffocation or CO poisoning in poorly ventilated shelters. The Inuit were meticulous about this. Every traditional snow house, igloo, had a vent hole at the top and an entrance tunnel that acted as a cold air drain. Your observation period is over. You've read the signs, assessed the conditions, and confirmed what you already knew. You're in a life-threatening situation with a narrow margin for error. The environment has told you everything it's going to tell you. Temperature is still dropping, night is coming, wind is light but could change, and you're burning calories at a prodigious rate just standing still. Time to stop analyzing and start building again. But now you build with knowledge. You know which way the wind is coming from, so you know where to place your entrance. You know the temperature is extreme enough that your building materials will be rock hard once properly compacted. You know you have less than an hour of usable light. And you know that every minute you spend exposed to this cold is a minute closer to the point where your body can't recover. The mound of snow sits waiting, patient and cold, and your only hope. You turn back to it, flexing your hands one more time to keep blood flowing to your fingers, and prepare for the next phase. The landscape has spoken. Now it's time to see if you listen well enough to survive. You approach your snow mound with a new respect for what you're about to attempt. This isn't just piling up some snow and calling it shelter. This is engineering, architecture, and thermodynamics all wrapped into one desperate bid for survival. The mound looks decent from the outside, maybe 1.5 meters high and 3 meters long, but that's just raw material. Now comes the part where you transform it from a pile of frozen water into a structure that might actually keep you alive through the night. First, you need to let it set. This sounds insane. You're freezing, darkness is coming, and I'm telling you to wait? But here's the thing. Snow needs time to sinter, to bond, to become structurally sound. When you compressed all those layers of snow, you broke the ice crystals and forced them into close contact. Now they need to refreeze together, forming bonds between crystals. In warmer snow conditions, say -10 degrees Celsius, this happens fairly quickly, in 15 to 30 minutes. In -71 degrees Celsius conditions, the process is actually faster because the temperature gradient is so extreme. The broken crystals are already refreezing as you build. But you still need to give it at least 10 or 15 minutes to stabilize, or the whole thing could collapse when you start hollowing it out. So you wait, and waiting in these conditions is its own special hell. You can't just stand still, that's suicide. Instead, you do what Arctic peoples have done for millennia, you keep moving. You stomp your feet, march in place, swing your arms across your body. It looks ridiculous, this human doing calisthenics in the middle of the Siberian forest, but it's keeping you alive. Each movement generates heat, keeps blood flowing to your extremities, prevents the insidious onset of hypothermia. You're burning through calories at an absurd rate, probably 150 to 200 calories per hour just standing here trying not to freeze. But there's no choice. Calories can be replaced if you survive. Dead can't. While you're moving, you scout for additional materials. A proper snow shelter benefits enormously from anything you can find to improve insulation or structure. You spot some dead grass poking through the snow about 10 meters away and trudge over to it. It's dry, brittle, frozen solid, but it's vegetation and that means potential insulation. You gather handfuls of it, breaking it off in clumps. This grass will go on the floor of your shelter, creating a layer between you and the snow, because direct contact with snow will suck heat from your body all night long. The Saka people traditionally used reindeer hides or layers of birch bark, but you'll take what you can get. Grass, pine boughs, anything that creates dead airspace between you and the frozen ground. You also look for branches. Not huge logs, those are for fire if you can get one going, but smaller branches with lots of twigs and needles still attached. Evergreen boughs are gold in shelter building because they're flexible, insulating, and abundant. The problem is most of the trees here are deciduous larches that have dropped their needles. But there are a few scraggly pines in the distance, Pinus siberica, Siberian stone pines that somehow survive here. You make your way to one, and with numb fingers you break off several lower branches. The tree barely notices. These branches will serve double duty. Some for the floor, some potentially to create a door or wind baffle for your entrance. Your 15 minutes are up. Actually, more like 20, you lost track while gathering materials, which is dangerous in itself. Time distortion is one of the early signs of hypothermia. But the snow mound should be set now. You return to it and press your gloved hand against the surface. It's rock solid, hard as concrete. Good. Very good. Now for the delicate part. You need to excavate an entrance tunnel and hollow out the interior without bringing the whole thing down on your head. Snow shelter construction has killed people, collapsed shelters, suffocation, structural failure. You're doing this without modern tools, which makes it harder but also weirdly safer in some ways. With a shovel, you might dig too aggressively and compromise the structure. With your hands and maybe a stick, you're forced to work slowly and carefully. You decide to start from the downwind side, the southern exposure away from the prevailing north wind. You'll tunnel in at ground level, then angle slightly upward into the mound. This creates what's called a cold well. The entrance tunnel sits lower than the sleeping platform, and since cold air is denser than warm air, it flows down and out, while any heat you generate stays in the upper portion where you'll be lying. It's the same principle behind traditional igloos, which have long entrance tunnels specifically designed to trap cold air away from the living space. You kneel in the snow, and Jesus, that's cold even through multiple layers of pants, and start digging with your gloved hands. The snow is compacted but not impossibly hard. You scoop it out, pulling it toward you, piling it to the sides. You're creating a trench, maybe half a meter wide, angling into the base of the mound. Dig, scoop, pile. Dig, scoop, pile. Your hands are already hurting again, that deep ache that comes from working in extreme cold. Every few minutes you have to stop, shove your hands into your armpits, wait for sensation to return. Here's a quirky fact from Soviet-era polar exploration. Researchers found that the optimal digging technique in compact snow is to use a combination of punching and scraping rather than trying to scoop big chunks. Punching breaks up the compressed snow, scraping clears it away. You adopt this technique, punching the snow with your fists. The impact helps keep your hands warm, actually. Then scraping the loosened snow out with cupped palms. The slow work, but it's progress. You're about a meter into the tunnel now, and you start angling upward. This is the tricky part. You're now excavating under the main mound, and you need to be very aware of how much snow is above your head and how thick the walls are becoming. You work by feel, reaching up to test the ceiling thickness. Too thin and it'll collapse or provide inadequate insulation. Too thick and you're wasting precious interior space and warmth. You're aiming for 30 to 40 centimeters minimum, which should give you both structural integrity and insulation. The tunnel is now long enough that you can crawl partially inside, which is both claustrophobic and oddly comforting. It's measurably warmer in here, still well below freezing, but the snow is blocking wind and your body heat is starting to accumulate in the confined space. You can feel the difference immediately. Outside is lethal. In here, in this small snow cave, is merely dangerously cold. That's progress. Now you begin hollowing out the main chamber. This requires you to essentially lie on your back and kick/punch/scrape the snow from above and to the sides, clearing out a space large enough to lie down in. This awkward, exhausting work. Snow falls on your face as you work, getting into your collar, melting from your body heat and then refreezing. You're creating a dome shape, not because you saw that in a documentary, but because dome shapes are naturally strong and distribute weight evenly. Any flat ceiling will want to collapse under its own weight. You excavate, scoop the snow down toward the entrance, then crawl backward and pull it out. Excavate, scoop, crawl, pull. Your back is screaming, your arms are burning, and you're breathing hard, which means you're fogging up the interior with your breath. The moisture immediately freezes on the walls, actually making them harder and stronger. A layer of ice forming over the compressed snow. This is good. Ice is a better insulator than you'd think, and it adds structural strength. Historians still argue whether the dome-shaped snow house was invented independently by different Arctic cultures or spread from a single point of origin, but archaeological evidence suggests humans have been building snow shelters for at least 10,000 years. There are ancient Inuit sites in Canada with the remains of snow house foundations, carefully constructed sleeping platforms elevated above the entrance level. Those people knew what they were doing. You're basically trying to reinvent thousands of years of accumulated wisdom in the next hour, working from instinct, and whatever you remember from survival shows you half-watched years ago. The chamber is taking shape. You've cleared out a space maybe 2 meters long and a meter wide, not spacious but enough to lie down in. The ceiling is a rough dome, maybe 80 centimeters at the highest point. You test the walls again, pushing hard. They're solid. The snow has compressed and frozen into a remarkably sturdy structure. You could probably stand on top of this thing without it collapsing, though you're not going to test that theory. But there's a critical step you can't forget: ventilation. This is where people die in snow shelters. They build a perfectly sealed space, light a candle or small fire for warmth, and slowly suffocate as the oxygen is consumed and carbon dioxide accumulates. Or they get carbon monoxide poisoning from combustion in a poorly ventilated space. The solution is simple but counterintuitive. You need to poke a hole in your shelter, letting cold air in. You take a stick, one of the pine branches you collected, and from inside the shelter you push it upward through the dome at an angle, punching through to the outside. The stick goes through relatively easily, and suddenly there's a hole about 2 centimeters in diameter, letting in a shaft of fading daylight. Cold air immediately flows in, and your first instinct is to plug it back up. But you don't. This hole, this tiny breach in your carefully constructed thermal envelope, is what's going to keep you alive. It'll allow carbon dioxide to escape and fresh oxygen to enter. You can always make it bigger if needed, or partially block it if it's letting in too much cold air. Now for the sleeping platform. Remember that cold air theory: cold sinks, warm rises? You need to sleep above the level of the entrance on a raised platform to take advantage of thermal stratification. You start piling up snow inside the chamber, compressing it into a raised bench along one wall. It doesn't need to be high, 15 or 20 centimeters is enough, but it needs to be solid. You pound it with your fists, compacting it as hard as you can. This platform is where you'll spend the night, and it needs to support your weight without collapsing or transmitting cold directly into your body. On top of the snow platform, you lay the pine boughs you collected, creating a springy, semi-insulated layer. Then the dead grass goes on top of that, a mat of vegetation between you and the frozen sleeping platform. It's not a mattress, but it's infinitely better than lying directly on snow. Every centimeter of insulation matters. The entrance tunnel needs work too. Right now it's just an open tube leading into your shelter, which means wind can blow straight in. You need a baffle, something to block direct wind while still allowing air exchange. You take more of the pine boughs and weave them together, roughly, crudely, but effectively, creating a loose mat maybe half a meter square. This goes across the entrance, not sealing it completely, just breaking up the wind flow. Cold air can still enter, necessary for ventilation, but it has to work its way around the baffle rather than blasting directly into your living space. You crawl back out to assess your work from the outside, and honestly, it doesn't look like much. A lump of snow with a dark hole at the base and a stick poking out the top. But you know what that lump represents. A functional survival shelter, built with bare hands in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The temperature is still dropping. You can feel it, see it in the thickening ice fog, sense it in the way your exposed face has gone completely numb. But you have a shelter now. You have a fighting chance. You gather your remaining pine boughs and grass and haul them inside, stuffing them into the entrance tunnel to keep as insulation or additional bedding. Then you take one last look around the darkening forest. The sun is gone, just a faint glow on the horizon, and the first stars are appearing in the purple-black sky. Venus is visible, brilliant, and unwavering. The temperature is plummeting moment by moment. Time to get inside and see if this thing actually works. You crawl into your shelter on hands and knees, dragging the last of your gathered materials behind you. The transition from outside to inside is immediate and startling. Not warm by any stretch, but the absence of wind is profound. Out there, even the light breeze was stripping heat from your body constantly. In here, the air is still dead calm, and your body heat isn't being stolen quite so aggressively. It's the difference between being robbed at gunpoint versus just having your wallet pickpocket. Still losing heat, but at a more survivable rate. The interior is cramped and dark. What little twilight remains outside barely penetrates through your entrance tunnel, and the ventilation hole you punched through the dome is just a pinprick of fading purple sky. You're essentially in a cave now, a snow cave of your own construction, and the darkness is total. Your eyes will adjust, but there's not much to adjust to. This is going to be a long night spent mostly in complete blackness, lying still, trying to conserve energy and warmth. Fun times. But before you can even think about settling in for the night, you need to address the fundamental problem that's been stalking you since you arrived in Yakutia: insulation. Your body is a furnace burning at 37 degrees Celsius, trying to maintain that temperature in an environment that's 108 degrees colder. The shelter helps by blocking wind and trapping air, but the walls, floor, and ceiling are all made of frozen water at minus 71 degrees Celsius. Without proper insulation between you and those surfaces, thermodynamics will slowly equalize your temperature with your surroundings. In other words, you'll freeze. You start by addressing the walls. Snow is a decent insulator already. Those air pockets between crystals do help, but you can improve it. You take some of the looser snow from your excavation and pack it against the interior walls, smoothing it, compressing it, creating a more uniform surface. As you work, your body heat and breath moisture start to glaze the surface. A thin layer of ice forms, which actually makes the walls harder and, counterintuitively, slightly better at insulating. The ice layer acts as a vapor barrier, preventing warm, moist air from your breathing from penetrating into the snow structure where it would reduce insulation value. Here's something the Inuit figured out centuries ago. A snow shelter actually improves over the first few hours of occupation. As you breathe and move inside, moisture freezes on the interior surfaces, strengthening them. Body heat causes slight melting at the innermost layer, which immediately refreezes into ice. Over time, the interior becomes lined with a shell of ice that's remarkably strong and smooth. Some traditional igloo builders would even intentionally glaze their interiors by lighting a small fire to cause controlled melting, then letting it refreeze into a hard, impermeable surface. You don't have fire yet, that's a whole other problem, but the principle is working in your favor already. The sleeping platform needs the most attention because you'll be in direct contact with it for hours. You've already got your base layer of compacted snow, the pine boughs providing some springiness and airspace, and the dead grass on top. But you need more. You take off your outer jacket, and the cold immediately bites even inside the shelter, and lay it out on the sleeping platform. This creates another layer of insulation between you and the frozen platform. Then you put the jacket back on because hypothermia is not your friend. You're essentially building a mattress from whatever you have: snow, vegetation, clothing arranged strategically. But there's a problem you're becoming acutely aware of: moisture. You've been working hard, physically exerting yourself for the past couple hours, and despite the cold, you've been sweating. Not pouring sweat, but enough that your base layers are damp against your skin. In normal conditions, this is annoying. In minus 71 degrees Celsius conditions, this is potentially lethal. Wet clothing loses its insulation value catastrophically because water conducts heat 25 times faster than air. Those nice air pockets in your fleece or down jacket, if they're filled with water instead of air, they become heat drains. You need to dry out, but you can't exactly strip down and hang your clothes out to dry. The solution, practiced by Arctic peoples for thousands of years, is to use your own body heat as a dryer while simultaneously not letting the moisture freeze. You take off your outer jacket again and shake it vigorously, trying to dislodge any ice crystals that have formed. Then you turn it inside out and put it back on, so the wet side is now facing outward and the dry side is against your other layers. Your body heat will gradually dry the moisture, and the dampness on the outside will freeze but won't be against your skin. It's not perfect, but it's better than sitting in wet clothes all night. You do the same with your hat, your gloves, even your scarf. Everything gets inspected for moisture and ice, shaken out, repositioned. This is finicky, tedious work in cramped, dark conditions with numb fingers, but it's absolutely critical. Historians still argue whether more Arctic explorers died from cold or from the complications of moisture management, but the smart money is on moisture. Scott's Antarctic expedition, Shackleton's Endurance crew, countless trappers and prospectors in the Yukon, they all learned that wetness kills faster than cold alone. Now you need to think about heat retention strategies beyond just insulation. Your body is losing heat through several pathways: conduction, direct contact with cold surfaces; convection, air movement, radiation, infrared heat radiating from your body, and evaporation, moisture leaving your skin and lungs. You've addressed conduction with your layered sleeping platform. You've minimized convection by building a windproof shelter. But radiation and evaporation are trickier. For radiation, you need to think about surface area. The more of your body exposed to the cold air, the more heat you radiate away. The solution is to ball up, make yourself small. You'll sleep in a fetal position, knees tucked to chest, arms wrapped around your legs, minimizing your surface area to volume ratio. This is why you see homeless people in cold cities sleeping curled up. It's not just for comfort, it's survival thermodynamics. Every square centimeter of skin you expose radiates precious heat into the void. For evaporation, the problem is mostly breathing. Every breath you take in cold air and exhale warm, moist air, you're losing both heat and water. In extreme cold, you can see your breath loss. Each exhale is a cloud of vapor that represents calories and hydration leaving your body. The Inuit solution was to breathe through fur ruffs or tucked scarves, pre-warming the inhaled air and capturing some of the exhaled moisture. You wrap your scarf around your face, creating a breathing space that's slightly warmer than the ambient air. It feels claustrophobic and the scarf immediately starts to ice up, but it's better than breathing minus 71 degrees Celsius air directly into your lungs. You're starting to shiver now. Not the violent, teeth-chattering kind, but a constant, low-level trembling. This is actually good news. Shivering is your body's emergency heat generation system, involuntary muscle contractions that can increase heat production by 2 to 5 times your resting metabolic rate. It burns through calories like crazy, but it works. The problem is that shivering only functions if you're not too hypothermic. Once your core temperature drops below about 32 degrees Celsius, shivering stops, and that's when things get really bad. As long as you're shivering, you're fighting. When shivering stops, you're losing. The light from your ventilation hole is gone now. Full darkness. You can't see your hand in front of your face. The only sensory input is the cold pressing in from all sides, the sound of your own breathing, and the creaking, groaning sounds of the snow shelter settling and adjusting to your presence. Those sounds are actually reassuring. They mean the structure is responding to stress but not failing. A sudden crack or sharp noise would be bad, indicating structural failure. The gentle creaks and groans you're hearing are normal. You lie down on your sleeping platform experimentally, testing the setup. The pine boughs compress under your weight, the grass crinkles. The platform is firm but not rock hard. Most importantly, you don't feel the shocking cold of direct snow contact. The insulation layers are working, creating a buffer zone between your body and the frozen platform. It's not comfortable. Comfort stopped being an option hours ago, but it's functional. Now you do something that feels absurd but is actually smart. You take inventory of your body parts, mentally checking in with each zone. Toes, numb but not painfully so, probably still viable. Feet cold but okay. Legs, functioning, some muscle fatigue. Torso, core temperature still seems okay. Shivering but not violently. Arms, tired, cold, but working. Hands. This is concerning. Your fingers are beyond numb, moving into that wooden, disconnected feeling that precedes frostbite. You need to warm them. Face. Completely numb. No feeling in nose or cheeks. This is also concerning but expected. Ears, protected by your hat, seem okay. You do the hand-warming routine again. Hands into armpits. Wait for the painful tingling as blood flow returns. The pain is actually welcome because pain means nerve endings still work. Means the tissue isn't dead yet. You cycle through. Left hand in right armpit, then switch, then both hands clasped together against your stomach. Takes several minutes, but slowly, painfully, sensation returns. Your fingers feel like they're being stabbed with thousands of tiny needles. That's good. That's your nervous system saying, "Still alive here. Please send blood." You adjust your position on the sleeping platform, trying to find the optimal configuration. Lying flat on your back exposes more surface area. Lying on your side in a fetal curl is better. You tuck your hands between your thighs, another warm spot, and bring your knees up to your chest. Your head goes down, chin tucked, reducing the exposed surface area of your neck and face. You're essentially trying to become a ball, a sphere, the geometric shape with the minimum surface area for a given volume. The shelter is doing its job. The temperature inside is definitely higher than outside. You can't measure it precisely, but you'd estimate you're at maybe minus 20 degrees Celsius to minus 30 degrees Celsius inside versus minus 71 degrees Celsius outside. That 40 to 50 degree difference is everything. It's the difference between dying in an hour and maybe, possibly, surviving until morning. But it's still dangerously cold. You're still losing heat faster than you're generating it. The shelter has bought you time, but it hasn't solved the fundamental problem. You realize, lying there in complete darkness, that you've been so focused on the physical structure that you haven't thought enough about the air quality inside your tiny snow cave. The ventilation hole is there, but is it enough? Carbon dioxide is heavier than air. It'll pool at the lowest points, but in this confined space, it could accumulate to dangerous levels. You make a mental note to position your head toward the entrance tunnel where fresh air can flow in, and to keep your breathing area away from any low spots where CO2 might collect. There's also the issue of moisture accumulation. Every breath you exhale adds water vapor to the air inside the shelter. That moisture will freeze on the coldest surfaces, the walls and ceiling. Over hours, this could create a layer of frost that gradually reduces your interior volume or, worse, starts dripping on you if your body heat warms the interior enough to cause melting. Traditional igloo builders dealt with this by maintaining a careful temperature balance and by regularly scraping frost from interior surfaces. You make another mental note to check the ceiling periodically and knock off any frost accumulation. But here's the thing about insulation and shelter in extreme cold. It's not a solved problem. It's an ongoing battle. You can't just build the shelter and forget about it. You have to maintain it, adjust it, respond to changing conditions. The wind outside might shift, requiring you to rebuild your entrance baffle. Temperature changes might cause settling or cracking that needs repair. Your own body heat might cause structural problems that need addressing. Shelter in Yakutia isn't a noun, it's a verb, something you do continuously, not something you have. You lie there, curled tight, shivering steadily, and take stock of your situation. You've built a functional shelter that's significantly warmer than the outside environment. You've addressed the major heat loss pathways as best you can with available materials. You've created a sleeping platform with multiple insulation layers. You've ensured ventilation while minimizing wind infiltration. By any measure, you've done well. But the cold is patient and relentless. It's not trying to kill you actively, it just is indifferent to your survival. Every minute, every hour, it extracts heat from your body. Your metabolism is burning calories to generate replacement heat, but those calories are finite. At your current burn rate, you've got maybe 12 to 16 hours before your body's reserves start running critically low. And dawn is still 10 or 11 hours away. The shelter is built. The insulation is in place. Now comes the hardest part, enduring. Just lying here in the dark, staying as still as possible to conserve energy, keeping your mind occupied so panic doesn't set in, and hoping your preparations are adequate. Outside, the temperature continues to drop. Inside, you wait. You lie curled on your sleeping platform, shivering steadily when you remember something crucial. You've built a shelter that might keep you alive, but survival isn't just about not dying from cold. It's about not dying from all the other ways extreme environments kill you. And one of the most insidious is suffocation or carbon monoxide poisoning. Which means, as much as you'd love to just huddle here conserving energy until dawn, you need to think about ventilation in a more active way. Specifically, you need to think about fire. Fire in a snow shelter sounds contradictory, maybe even suicidal. You're inside a structure made entirely of frozen water, and you want to introduce an open flame? But here's the thing. Indigenous Arctic peoples have been doing exactly this for thousands of years. The key is doing it right with proper ventilation and careful management. A small fire, even just a candle, can raise the interior temperature by 10 or 15 degrees, making the difference between miserable survival and something approaching tolerable. More importantly, fire gives you the ability to melt snow for drinking water, and dehydration in the Arctic kills almost as efficiently as freezing. But you don't have matches. You don't have a lighter. You don't have any modern fire-starting equipment at all. What you have are your hands, knowledge of basic physics, and a forest full of frozen wood that really doesn't want to burn. This is going to be interesting. You crawl back out of your shelter, and Jesus, the cold hits you like a physical wall, to gather fire-making materials while you still have some energy and dexterity. The sky is now fully dark, stars blazing with that peculiar crystal clarity you only get in extreme cold when the air is so dry and clean that there's essentially zero atmospheric interference. The Milky Way is a luminous band across the sky. In other circumstances, it would be beautiful. Right now, it's just a reminder that you're very small and very vulnerable under a vast, indifferent universe. You need three things: tinder, kindling, and fuel. And you need them in a form that will actually ignite and burn despite being frozen solid. Let's start with the hardest part: creating an ember without matches. The most reliable primitive fire-starting method in extremely cold conditions is the bow drill, which uses friction to create a hot coal. But bow drills are finicky even in ideal conditions, and these are the opposite of ideal conditions. The wood is frozen, your hands are numb, and you're already exhausted. Historians still argue whether bow drills were actually used in the coldest regions or whether Arctic peoples relied more on methods like striking flint and steel, but archaeological evidence suggests bow drills were known and used even in Siberia, adapted for local conditions. You need to find the right wood. Not just any dead branch will work. You need dry wood that's soft enough to generate friction dust but hard enough to maintain structural integrity. Birch bark is ideal for tinder because of its high oil content. Birch trees, Betula species, produce bark that contains betulin, a highly flammable compound that makes it burn even when damp. You scan the area with your rapidly deteriorating night vision and spot the pale, papery bark of a birch tree maybe 20 meters away. Trudging through the snow in full darkness is treacherous. Every step is a gamble. You could step on a hidden branch into a depression onto ice. But you need that bark, so you move carefully, testing each step before committing your weight. When you reach the birch, you use your fingernails and a sharp stick to peel off strips of the outer bark. Comes away in papery sheets, each one crackling with cold. You gather as much as you can carry, maybe a dozen good strips, then stuff them inside your jacket against your body to start warming them. Cold bark is harder to ignite than bark that's been warmed to near body temperature. Next, you need wood for the actual fire-making apparatus and for fuel. You look for standing dead wood, trees that died but remain upright, because wood on the ground is often damp from snow contact. You find a dead larch, bark falling off, wood dry and weathered. Using your body weight and leverage, you break off several branches of different sizes. The wood snaps cleanly in the cold. Remember that brittle wood effect from earlier? Which makes collection easier but also means your fire bow might break mid-use. You gather an armful, thin twigs for kindling, finger-thick branches for the bow and drill, and thicker pieces for fuel. Back at your shelter, you arrange everything in the entrance tunnel where you have slightly more room to work. Your hands are already going numb again from the gathering expedition. You warm them, flex your fingers, and begin the painstaking work of constructing a bow drill. A bow drill consists of 4 components. The bow, a curved stick with a cord that spins the drill. The drill, a straight stick that spins against the fireboard. The fireboard, a flat piece of wood that the drill spins into. And the handhold, something to press down on top of the drill to increase pressure. You need to make all of these from frozen wood in near total darkness using numb fingers. No problem, right? The bow is relatively straightforward. A curved larch branch about as long as your forearm. For the cord, you don't have cord. Shoelaces? Yes, you have shoelaces. You remove one lace from your boot. Careful not to let snow get inside the boot. Wet feet are death. And tie it to both ends of the bow with simple but tight knots. The cord needs to be taut enough to spin the drill rapidly but not so tight that the bow can't flex. The drill is a straight stick, maybe as thick as your thumb and about 25 centimeters long. You smooth it as best you can with your knife. Wait, you don't have a knife. Okay, you smooth it by scraping it against a rough stone and biting off splinters with your teeth, which is probably terrible for your dental health, but whatever, you have bigger problems. The drill needs to be as round and straight as possible for efficient spinning. The fireboard is trickier. You need a flat piece of wood, which nature doesn't really provide in convenient form. You take a thicker branch and split it lengthwise using the time-honored technique of finding a wedge-shaped rock and pounding on it until the wood cracks. Takes forever, and you're smashing your half-frozen fingers repeatedly, but eventually you get a relatively flat piece of larch wood about 30 centimeters long. Now comes the technical part. You cut a small divot in the fireboard where the drill will spin, just a shallow depression to keep the drill in place initially. Then, next to that, you carve a V-shaped notch from the edge of the board extending to where the divot is. This notch is critical. It's where the hot dust from friction will collect and eventually form an ember. The notch needs to be about 1/8 of the circle of the drill, cutting into the divot like a pie slice missing. For the handhold, you find a piece of wood with a natural hollow or you carve a divot into a small block. This goes on top of the drill to provide downward pressure while allowing the drill to spin freely. Some people use a stone or a piece of bone. You're using a chunk of larch with a depression worn into it by your fumbling, freezing fingers. Assembly time. You loop the bowstring around the drill once, creating a twist. The drill is now positioned between the string and the bow. When you move the bow back and forth, the drill should spin. You test this motion back and forth, and yes, the drill spins. Good. Very good. Now you place the bottom tip of the drill into the divot on the fireboard, press down with the handhold on the top of the drill, and prepare to begin the actual friction process. But first, you need tinder ready. You take the birch bark you've been warming against your body and shred it into fine strips, creating a bird's nest of highly flammable material. This nest goes right next to where you'll be working, ready to receive the ember if you create one. You also prepare fine twigs and wood shavings as a progression of kindling. You'll need to build the fire gradually from ember to flame to sustainable burn. Here's something they don't tell you in survival shows. Bow drill firemaking in extreme cold is brutally, soul-crushingly hard. Every factor works against you. The wood is frozen and doesn't want to generate hot friction dust. Your hands are numb and can't maintain consistent pressure and speed. Your body is shaking from cold, making smooth bow strokes nearly impossible. And you're already exhausted, low on calories, operating on adrenaline and desperation. You begin. Right hand on the bow, left hand pressing down on the handhold, drill positioned vertically between them, fireboard on the ground held in place by your knee. You move the bow back and forth, trying to establish a rhythm. The drill spins, but inconsistently. You adjust your grip, try again. Back, forth, forth. The drill wobbles, falls out of the divot. You reposition, start over. 5 minutes in, you've made a small depression in the fireboard, but no smoke, no dust collecting in your V-notch. Your arms are burning with fatigue. 10 minutes in, you're starting to get a dark discoloration in the wood. That's progress, that's friction working, but still no smoke. Your right arm feels like it's going to fall off. 15 minutes in, finally, a tiny wisp of smoke rises from the drill point. You're getting close. You increase your speed, trying to maintain consistent pressure, and yes, smoke is coming steadily now, and dark dust is accumulating in the V-notch. But here's the thing about bow drills. You have to keep going well past when you think you should stop. That dust needs to reach ignition temperature, which means sustained friction for longer than seems reasonable. You keep sawing back and forth, the bow moving in steady rhythm, smoke now pouring from the friction point. Your arms are screaming. Sweat is running down your face despite the cold. And remember, sweat is dangerous, but you can't stop now. Finally, after what feels like an eternity but is probably 20 or 25 minutes, you judge the moment is right. You carefully remove the drill and handhold, then gently tap the fireboard. A tiny glowing coal, an ember, falls through the V-notch onto the ground. It's working. Holy shit, it's actually working. Now for the delicate part. Using a thin piece of bark, you carefully transfer the ember into your prepared tinder nest. The ember sits there, glowing faintly orange in the darkness. You bring the nest up to your face and blow on it gently, steadily, feeding oxygen to the coal. The ember grows brighter. The birch bark starts to smoke. You keep blowing, gentle but persistent. The smoke increases. And then, suddenly, beautifully, a small flame licks up from the tinder. You have fire. You carefully, so carefully, set the burning tinder nest down and begin feeding it with the finest shavings and twigs. The flame is tiny, fragile, could die any second. But you nurse it, adding incrementally larger pieces as it grows. Twig by twig, the fire establishes itself. Within minutes, you have a small but legitimate fire burning in front of your shelter entrance. The warmth on your face is immediate and glorious, almost painful. Your frozen cheeks and nose are suddenly aware they exist again. But you can't just sit here basking, you need to manage this fire carefully. Too big and it'll melt your shelter. Too small and it'll die out. And most importantly, you need ventilation to prevent carbon monoxide buildup. You arrange a few larger pieces of wood in a small log cabin configuration, creating a sustained burn that'll last maybe 30 or 40 minutes. The fire is small flames barely 20 centimeters high, but it's generating heat. You position yourself so the smoke drifts away from your shelter entrance, carried by the slight breeze. But you can't bring fire inside the shelter itself. That's suicide, melting, suffocation, carbon monoxide poisoning. Instead, you're going to heat stones. You find several fist-sized rocks near your fire and place them at the edge of the flames. These will absorb heat, and once they're hot, you can carefully transport them inside your shelter where they'll radiate warmth for hours without open flame. It's a technique used by countless cold-weather peoples, hot stone heating. While the stones heat, you do something critical, you melt snow for water. Dehydration is a massive problem in cold environments because you lose moisture through breathing and don't feel thirsty. You scoop snow into a piece of birch bark folded into a crude container and hold it near the flames. The snow melts, and you drink the resulting water immediately. It's cold but not frozen, and your body desperately needs it. You tend the fire, add wood, heat more stones, melt more snow. For the first time since arriving in Yakutia, you're not actively dying. You're in a holding pattern, maintaining rather than declining. The fire crackles softly, orange light dancing on the snow around you, and for just a moment, survival seems possible. The fire burns steadily in front of your shelter, a small defiant island of warmth in the vast frozen darkness. You've got maybe 4 or 5 decent pieces of wood left, enough to keep this going for another hour if you're careful. And your stones are heating nicely at the fire's edge. They've gone from dark gray to a lighter shade as they absorb heat, and occasionally you hear a sharp crack as thermal expansion causes small fractures. That's fine as long as they don't split completely. A hot stone is a portable furnace, and right now, portable furnaces are exactly what you need. But here's the reality check. This fire isn't a solution. It's a temporary reprieve. Fire requires fuel, and fuel requires energy to collect, and energy requires calories, and calories are something you're running dangerously low on. Every time you venture out to gather more wood, you're spending precious resources, body heat, muscular energy, time, that you might not be able to afford. The indigenous peoples of Yakutia solved this problem through preparation. They cached firewood during warmer months, maintained permanent shelters with fuel supplies, and traveled with reindeer or dogs that could carry materials. You have none of that. You're improvising survival with zero preparation in conditions that don't forgive mistakes. Still, the fire is here now, and you need to maximize its utility while it lasts. You use a stick to roll one of the heated stones away from the flames, then wait a few seconds for it to cool just enough that it won't immediately melt through snow on contact. Testing its temperature is tricky. Too hot and you'll get a nasty burn, too cool and it's useless. You tap it lightly with a gloved finger. The glove fabric sizzles slightly but doesn't catch fire. Good enough. Using 2 sticks as improvised tongs, you carefully maneuver the hot stone into your shelter, placing it on your sleeping platform near where your feet will be. Not touching your bedding materials directly, you create a small depression in the snow platform and nestle the stone into that. The heat radiating from it is immediately noticeable, a pocket of warmth in the cold cave. You repeat the process with 2 more stones, spacing them along the sleeping platform. The temperature inside your shelter climbs noticeably. It's still below freezing, but instead of minus 30 degrees Celsius, you're probably looking at minus 15 degrees Celsius or maybe even minus 10 degrees Celsius near the stones. That's a massive improvement. Here's a quirky historical detail. Russian Old Believers, religious refugees who fled to remote Siberia in the 18th and 19th centuries, became masters of heated stone technology. They'd heat rocks in their outdoor fires during the day, then bury them under their sleeping areas at night. Some families maintained special stones that were perfect for heating, dense, fracture-resistant, the right size for handling. These stones would be passed down through generations, valued possessions in a land where warmth literally meant survival. You're using random rocks you found in the snow, which is considerably less optimal, but the principle is the same. Now you turn your attention to improving your fire-making capability for tomorrow. Because yes, you're thinking about tomorrow now, about the ongoing challenge of survival rather than just making it through the next few hours. You need to create char cloth, partially burned fabric that catches sparks easily, except you don't have fabric to spare. But you can make char bark from birch. You tear off a small piece of birch bark and place it at the very edge of the fire, where it'll smolder and blacken without fully burning. This charred bark will be much easier to ignite than raw material, meaning if you need to make fire again tomorrow, the process will be faster and less calorie-intensive. You also create what you're mentally calling fire insurance. You find a piece of wood with a hollow or cavity and fill it with hot coals from your fire, then cover it with ash and moss. This is a coal carrier, another ancient technology. If maintained properly and protected from wind, coals can stay alive for 12 to 24 hours inside such a carrier, meaning you don't have to go through the entire bow drill ordeal again tomorrow. You just blow the coals back to life and add tinder. The Saka people and other northern groups perfected this technique, carrying fire with them as they traveled, treating it as precious cargo because starting fire from scratch in extreme cold is so difficult. Your fire is burning down now, flames reducing to glowing coals. You're burning through your wood supply faster than you'd like, but the heated stones inside your shelter have bought you hours of relative comfort. The temptation is to gather more wood right now, to keep the fire going indefinitely. But you need to be smart about energy expenditure. Going out into -71 degrees Celsius darkness to stumble around collecting wood is dangerous and calorie expensive. Better to let the fire die naturally, conserve your energy, and rely on your shelter and hot stones to get through the night. Before you abandon the fire completely, though, you do one more critical thing: you eat. Well, eat is generous. You melt more snow and drink as much water as you can stand, filling your stomach with liquid to at least create the sensation of fullness. You don't have food. This is a serious problem that you've been avoiding thinking about too directly because, frankly, it's terrifying. An average person needs 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day just to maintain basic function. In extreme cold, you need 5,000 to 7,000 calories per day. You have 0 calories. Your body is already metabolizing its own fat and glycogen reserves, and once those run low, it'll start breaking down muscle tissue for energy. You can survive weeks without food under normal conditions, but these aren't normal conditions. Your caloric burn rate is astronomical. Historians still argue whether traditional Siberian peoples could actually survive extended periods without food in extreme cold, or whether traditional knowledge and modern observations have exaggerated their capabilities. The reality is probably somewhere in the middle. Yes, indigenous peoples developed physiological and behavioral adaptations, brown fat deposits, altered metabolic efficiency, cultural practices around food sharing, but no, they couldn't magically survive indefinitely without eating. They planned extensively, cached food, and understood seasonal movements of game. Your situation, isolated, unprepared, 0 food reserves, is one they would have avoided at almost any cost. But dwelling on what you don't have isn't productive. Instead, you focus on what you do have: a functional shelter, heated stones providing warmth, a coal carrier preserving fire for tomorrow, char bark for easier ignition, and crucially, water. Dehydration will kill you faster than starvation, and you've addressed that. The human body is remarkably resilient. You can probably survive 3 to 5 days without food even in these conditions before your faculties seriously decline. The question is whether rescue or some change in circumstance will come before then. You bank your fire, covering the coals with ash to preserve them as long as possible, then crawl back into your shelter. The difference is remarkable. The interior is almost warm, not actually warm, but the perception of warmth compared to outside. The heated stones are radiating gentle heat. Your sleeping platform feels less immediately hostile to human life. You arrange yourself in the same tight fetal position, but this time you can actually feel your muscles starting to relax slightly, the constant tension of fighting cold reducing just a bit. The darkness inside is complete now that you've left the fire's glow behind. your other senses compensate. You hear the faint whisper of air moving through your ventilation hole, the settling creaks of the snow structure, your own breathing. You smell smoke on your clothes, a weirdly comforting scent that signals warmth and human activity. You feel the gradually dissipating heat from the stones, the relative softness of your bedding materials, the cold air on your face where it's exposed. And you think about fire not just as a survival tool, but as the technology that allowed humans to colonize cold environments in the first place. Without fire, humans would be restricted to tropical and subtropical regions. Fire is what permitted our species to spread across the planet, to inhabit every terrestrial ecosystem except the most extreme. Your bow drill, your heated stones, your coal carrier, these are technologies that date back thousands of years, refined by countless generations of people who lived in places like Yakutia and figured out, through trial and error and accumulated wisdom, how to survive. There's something profound about lying here in the darkness using techniques that haven't fundamentally changed in millennia. You don't have modern gear, no Gore-Tex or chemical heat packs or GPS emergency beacons. You're surviving barely precariously, using the same principles that allowed humans to thrive in Siberia during the last ice age. In a weird way, it's connecting you to an unbroken chain of survival stretching back into deep prehistory. The heat from the stones is fading now, gradually, but it'll last for hours. The stone nearest your feet is still warm enough that you can feel it through your boots and socks. The one near your torso radiates a pleasant warmth that takes the edge off the cold. You're not comfortable. Comfort is a concept from another world, but you're no longer in immediate danger of freezing. Your core temperature has stabilized. Your shivering has reduced to occasional tremors rather than constant shaking. You allow yourself to consider the possibility of sleep. Not deep sleep, that's too dangerous, too risky of not waking up, but maybe a kind of rest, a dozing state where you're conscious enough to monitor your condition but relaxed enough to conserve energy. Arctic peoples developed the ability to take short naps throughout the night, never fully unconscious, always alert to changes in temperature or threats. It's a survival adaptation you're going to need to learn rapidly. But before you attempt rest, you do a final systems check. Toes, cold but not numb, still wiggling. Fingers, same, maintained through constant attention and warming. Face, numb but protected by your scarf. Breathing, steady, no signs of respiratory distress. Mental state, alert, maybe slightly fuzzy from exhaustion but still rational. No signs of serious hypothermia, no confusion, no paradoxical undressing urge, no loss of fine motor control beyond what's expected from cold. The ventilation hole is doing its job. You can feel very slight air movement, the faintest breeze of cold air entering while the carbon dioxide you're exhaling finds its way out. The entrance tunnel with its baffle is blocking wind while allowing necessary air exchange. Your shelter is functioning as designed. You let your mind wander a bit, a dangerous indulgence but one you need to maintain sanity. You think about warmth, not as a survival necessity but as a luxury. Hot showers, heated cars, indoor spaces maintained at 20 degrees Celsius year-round. Things you took completely for granted, things that required massive infrastructure and energy expenditure but seemed normal, unremarkable. You think about how the average modern human lives in a thermal bubble, almost never experiencing real cold or real heat, existing in a narrow comfort band that would have been unimaginable to 99% of humans throughout history. And you think about the people who live in Yakutia year-round, in Oymyakon and Verkhoyansk, the coldest permanently inhabited places on Earth. They don't think of themselves as extreme or unusual. This is just home. They have adaptations, cultural, technological, maybe even physiological, that you lack. Their buildings have triple-paned windows and heating systems that run continuously all winter. They drive cars with special cold weather modifications. They wear traditional fur clothing that's been perfected over generations. They know exactly how to dress, how to move, what to avoid. And even with all that knowledge and preparation, people still die in Yakutia winters. People still freeze when their cars break down, when they get lost, when they make small mistakes. You're alive right now because you made quick, decent decisions and got lucky with your shelter location and the availability of materials. But luck isn't a renewable resource. Tomorrow you'll need to make more decisions. Stay or try to move toward civilization, conserve energy or search for food. maintain this shelter, or try to improve your situation. For now, though, those are tomorrow's problems. The stones are still warm. The shelter holds. The darkness is complete but not threatening. And for the first time since you arrived in this frozen hell, you allow yourself to believe you might actually survive the night. You lie in the darkness, feeling the warmth from your heated stones gradually dissipate into the void, and reality intrudes with uncomfortable insistence. You need water, and you need it regularly. The fire is dead or dying, which means your easy melting source is gone. But dehydration in extreme cold is insidious and deadly. You're losing moisture with every breath you exhale, and the dry air is pulling water from your body through your skin. In normal conditions, you might feel thirsty and respond appropriately. In extreme cold, the thirst mechanism is suppressed, your body's priorities scrambled by the constant fight against hypothermia. You could be dangerously dehydrated and not even realize it until you start experiencing confusion, decreased coordination, and accelerated hypothermia. So you need a plan for water that doesn't involve going outside and rebuilding a fire every few hours. The solution is both elegant and primitive body heat melting. You take a double handful of clean snow from near your entrance, not the snow from inside your shelter, which your breath has contaminated with bacteria, and definitely not yellow snow because even in a survival situation standards matter, and pack it into a makeshift container. Except you don't have a container. You improvise by using birch bark folded into a rough pouch, tucking it inside your inner clothing layers against your stomach. This is going to be uncomfortable. Snow at -71 degrees Celsius against your torso, even with fabric layers between, is shocking. Your body recoils, muscles tensing, and you have to consciously force yourself to keep the snow-filled bark pouch in place. The cold is so intense it's almost painful, but you're playing a longer game here. Your body heat, that precious, hard-won 37 degrees Celsius, will melt the snow over the next 30 to 60 minutes. It's calorie expensive. Melting snow requires energy, specifically about 334 joules per gram to convert ice to liquid water, and that energy is coming from your metabolic reserves. But dehydration will kill you faster than the caloric cost of staying hydrated, so it's a trade you have to make. Here's something the indigenous Saka people figured out centuries ago. You don't melt snow directly in your mouth. It's tempting. Your mouth is warm. Snow is right there. But eating snow to hydrate is a disaster. First, it uses enormous calories to melt the snow and warm it to body temperature. Second, it rapidly cools your core temperature, which is already struggling to stay elevated. Third, it can cause cold injuries to your mouth and throat. The traditional method is exactly what you're doing. Melt snow gradually using body heat in an external container, then drink the resulting water. It's slower and requires planning ahead, but it's far more efficient. While you wait for your snow to melt, you do something that seems counterproductive but is actually vital. You force yourself to eat more snow for volume. Not much, just small amounts pressed against the inside of your cheek where the thermal shock is less severe, letting it melt slowly with saliva before swallowing. This isn't your primary hydration method, but it supplements your system. Every bit of moisture helps, and unlike the survival myth suggests, you can consume small amounts of snow orally if you do it carefully and slowly. You check your birch bark pouch after about 20 minutes. The snow has partially melted into a slurry of ice crystals and water. Not ideal for drinking yet, but progress. You keep it against your stomach, enduring the cold, waiting for full conversion to liquid. Your body is basically a very expensive, inefficient snowmelting machine right now, burning calories to provide a service that a simple fire could do far more efficiently. But you don't have fire anymore, at least not accessible fire, so your body is the tool you've got. 35 minutes in, you've got mostly liquid water with some ice crystals floating in it. Close enough. You extract the bark pouch carefully. It's crude and leaky, but functional, and drink. The water is cold, obviously, not quite freezing but close. It's also slightly bitter from the birch bark tannins. You don't care. Hydration is hydration. You drink it all, maybe 300 milliliters, feeling the cold liquid slide down into your stomach. Your body immediately begins working to warm that water to internal temperature, another caloric expense, but the hydration benefit outweighs the cost. Now you need to think about food, which is really thinking about the absence of food and what that means for your survival timeline. The human body stores energy in three primary forms: glycogen in muscles and liver, quick access energy, depleted within 24 to 48 hours, fat tissue, longer-term energy reserve, and as a last resort, muscle protein, which your body really doesn't want to break down because muscles are useful for survival. You've been in extreme cold for hours now, burning calories at an elevated rate. Your glycogen stores are probably significantly depleted already. Your body is transitioning to fat metabolism, which is fine, that's what fat is for, but fat metabolism in extreme cold has limitations. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Without food, you've got maybe 3 to 5 days before serious cognitive and physical decline, possibly less given the caloric demands of your situation. After that, decision-making becomes impaired, physical coordination degrades, and your ability to maintain body temperature decreases as metabolic capacity diminishes. It's a downward spiral. Cold stress requires calories. Lack of calories reduces cold resistance. Increased cold stress requires more calories you don't have. Eventually, the math doesn't work. But let's be optimistic. 3 to 5 days is enough time for several things. Weather could improve, allowing you to travel. You could find food sources. Rescue could arrive if anyone knows you're missing, or you could encounter human habitation. The key is to maximize your survival window by minimizing unnecessary caloric expenditure. Every unnecessary movement, every venture out into the cold, every moment of inadequate insulation, they all tax your reserves. So what are your food options in a Yakutian winter forest? Let's be honest, they're grim. Most animals have hibernated or migrated. The Siberian jay and a few other birds remain active, but good luck catching one with bare hands. The Arctic hare ranges this far south, but again, no weapons, no traps, low probability. Some rodents like voles tunnel under the snow and remain active, but finding them is nearly impossible. Fish are under meters of ice in frozen rivers. Plant foods are non-existent. Everything is frozen solid or buried under snow. There are technically edible options if you know where to look. Pine needles can be chewed for minimal calories and vitamin C. Scurvy prevention matters if you're looking at extended survival. The inner bark of certain trees, cambium layer, is technically edible and has been used as starvation food by various cultures. It's not pleasant, very low in calories, but it's something. You could potentially set deadfall traps or snares if you had cordage, but your one shoelace is in use as a bow drill string, and you're not sure you have the energy to spend on low-probability trap setting. Historians still argue whether accounts of Siberian shamans surviving extended fasts in extreme cold are accurate or exaggerated, but there's interesting research suggesting ketosis, when your body switches to burning fat and producing ketones for energy, might actually improve cold tolerance in some ways. Ketones are a more efficient fuel source for the brain, and some studies suggest improved mental clarity during early-stage fasting. You might actually think more clearly tomorrow than you do today, at least before the serious deficits start kicking in. The most realistic food scenario is that you're not getting any, at least not in meaningful quantities, which means your survival strategy has to focus on the things you can control. Maintaining shelter, staying hydrated, conserving energy, and hopefully getting rescued or finding civilization before your reserves run out. It's not a great strategy, but it's the one you've got. You prepare another batch of snow for melting, tucking it against your torso with gritted teeth. Hydration is the one thing you can maintain, the one input you can control. You'll melt and drink snow every few hours throughout the night, keeping your fluid status as good as possible. It's cold, it's uncomfortable, it costs calories, but dehydration will degrade your capabilities faster than hunger alone. The stones have gone cold now, just inert rocks on your sleeping platform. They serve their purpose, buying you hours of relative warmth, but physics is implacable. The heat has dissipated into the surrounding cold, entropy doing its work. The interior temperature is dropping back toward equilibrium with outside. Not all the way, the shelter still provides wind protection and some thermal benefit, but you can feel the cold creeping back in, reclaiming territory. You adjust your position, checking extremities again. Toes, still okay, wiggling them inside your boots. Fingers, cold but functional, you've been doing regular warm-up exercises. Face, numb where exposed, but no signs of frostbite. The key is constant vigilance, never letting any body part get cold enough for long enough that ice crystals start forming in tissues. Frostbite is insidious. It doesn't hurt initially because the cold numbs the tissue. By the time you realize there's a problem, the damage might already be done. You think about caloric expenditure reduction strategies. Minimize movement. Every muscle contraction burns calories. Maintain your fetal position. Minimizes surface area and heat loss. Keep your breathing shallow and steady. Reduces respiratory heat and moisture loss. Sleep if possible, though that's easier said than done when you're cold and uncomfortable and slightly terrified. Sleep is metabolically efficient. Your body can reduce caloric burn by 10 to 15% during sleep. But sleep in extreme cold is also dangerous if you drop too deep and stop shivering, letting your core temperature drift downward. The solution practiced by polar explorers and indigenous peoples is what you might call alert resting. A state between wakefulness and sleep where you're relaxed enough to conserve energy but aware enough to monitor your condition and respond to threats. It's not true sleep, more like meditation or a trance state. You let your mind drift without losing fundamental awareness of your body and environment. You try it now. Eyes closed. Not that it matters in the complete darkness. Breathing steady and regular. Muscles relaxed as much as the cold allows. Mind wandering but not fully disengaging. You think about warmth again, tropical beaches and desert sun, trying to trick your brain into generating some psychological comfort. It doesn't actually warm you, but maybe it helps with morale, and morale matters in survival situations. Time becomes elastic in the darkness. You might lie here for 20 minutes or 2 hours, there's no way to tell. You melt and drink snow twice more or maybe 3 times. You do hand-warming exercises, toe wiggling, checking sensation. You adjust your scarf to better protect your face. You listen to your shelter creak and settle. You exist in a strange liminal state, not quite sleeping but not fully awake, conserving energy while maintaining vigilance. And you survive. Hour by hour, moment by moment, you maintain your core temperature, stay hydrated, avoid frostbite, and keep your cognitive functions operational. It's not heroic or dramatic. It's just the grim, stubborn persistence of a biological organism refusing to achieve thermodynamic equilibrium with its environment. Your body burns through its reserves, fat, glycogen, eventually muscle if this goes on long enough, to generate the heat that keeps you alive. It's the most fundamental transaction in survival. Stored energy converted to warmth, buying time, hoping time is enough. Outside, the Yakutia night continues, temperatures still dropping toward their nadir in the hours before dawn. The forest is silent except for occasional cracks as trees contract in the extreme cold. Somewhere in the darkness, the aurora borealis might be dancing. The northern lights are common at these latitudes, but you can't see it from inside your snow cave. You're isolated, cut off, existing in your own tiny bubble of maintained temperature in a universe of cold. But you're alive. Still, for now, and that's enough. The darkness is absolute and timeless. You've lost all sense of how long you've been lying here in your snow shelter. Could be 3 hours, could be 8. Your body's internal clock, already disrupted by extreme stress and cold, has completely abandoned any pretense of tracking time. You exist in an eternal present, each moment distinct and yet identical to the last. Cold, uncomfortable, hyper-aware of every sensation, every small shift in temperature or position. This is the psychological dimension of survival that nobody really prepares you for, the sheer, grinding tedium of enduring. Your mind, starved for stimulation in the sensory deprivation of your snow cave, starts doing weird things. You hear sounds that aren't there, phantom voices, music, mechanical noises. This is normal, you remind yourself. Auditory hallucinations in isolation are well documented. Polar explorers, solo sailors, prisoners in solitary confinement, they all report similar experiences. Your brain, designed to process constant sensory input, starts generating its own content when deprived of external stimuli. You hear what sounds like someone calling your name, distant and muffled. You know it's not real, but your heart rate still spikes, adrenaline flooding your system. The surge of energy makes you warmer for a few moments, which is actually useful, but the come down will be exhausting. You force yourself to engage in mental exercises to maintain cognitive function and sanity. You count backwards from 1,000 by sevens. 1,993. 986, 779. Wait, that's not right. Start over. This is harder than it should be. Cold affects cognition, slows processing, makes even simple arithmetic challenging. You recite poems you remember from school, sing songs in your head, replay conversations from years ago. Anything to keep your mind active and engaged, to prevent the slide into hypothermic confusion where you stop caring about survival and just want to rest. Here's something rescue teams know but most people don't. The psychological breaking point often comes in the middle of the night, in the darkest hours between midnight and dawn. That's when exhaustion, cold, fear, and isolation converge to create a crisis of will. People who were maintaining discipline suddenly make catastrophic decisions. They leave their shelters, wander into the cold, give up. It's called the 3 a.m. decision among search and rescue personnel, and it kills more people than you'd think. You're acutely aware this might be happening to you right now. The temptation to just get up, leave this cramped, cold cave and do something, anything, is powerful. But you know that leaving your shelter at night in minus 71 degrees Celsius without a clear destination or plan is suicide. Your shelter, cramped and cold as it is keeping you alive. Outside is death, simple as that. So you stay and you endure and you hate every second of it, and you keep enduring anyway because the alternative is freezing to death in the darkness. Your body is starting to protest in new and creative ways. You need to urinate, which presents a complex problem. Leaving the shelter to pee means exposing yourself to lethal cold for several minutes. But urinating inside your shelter, or worse, in your clothing, means introducing moisture that will freeze and destroy your insulation. The indigenous peoples had solutions for this: specialized containers, designated urination spots, cultural practices around waste management in winter shelters. You have none of that. You decide to crawl out, reasoning that a few minutes of extreme cold is better than compromised insulation. The transition from shelter to outside is shocking. Even though your shelter isn't warm, the outside cold is qualitatively different. Aggressive, penetrating, immediately painful. You do your business as quickly as humanly possible, watching your urine freeze into steam before it even hits the ground, creating an instant ice patch. The whole process takes maybe 90 seconds, but by the time you crawl back inside, you're shivering violently and your extremities have gone numb again. You spend the next 15 minutes doing aggressive warming exercises, flexing, tensing muscles, rubbing limbs, to recover from that brief exposure. It's a stark reminder that every action in this environment has consequences, costs that must be carefully weighed. The simple act of urination just cost you probably 100 calories and 15 minutes of recovery time. The mental landscape is getting strange now. You're not confused or disoriented. Your cognitive function is still intact enough to recognize that, but you're experiencing what psychologists call temporal dissociation. Past, present, and future blur together. You remember building the shelter, but it feels like something that happened weeks ago. You think about dawn coming but can't quite believe it's a real thing that will actually happen. You exist in this perpetual dark present, and intellectually you know time is passing, but experientially, you're trapped in amber. You catch yourself negotiating with the universe. If I survive this night, I'll never complain about being cold again. I'll donate to Arctic research. I'll be a better person. It's irrational, the universe doesn't make deals, but humans are meaning-making creatures, and your brain is desperate to impose narrative structure on random suffering. Anthropologists studying crisis situations note this pattern constantly. People create stories, bargains, frameworks to make senseless hardship feel meaningful. It doesn't change the physical reality, but maybe it helps psychologically. Historians still argue whether religious or spiritual beliefs actually improve survival outcomes in extreme situations, but there's interesting evidence that having a strong sense of purpose, religious or otherwise, correlates with better survival rates. People who believe they're surviving for something, family, faith, a mission, even just stubborn spite, seem to push through the psychological breaking point more reliably than those who view survival as merely biological persistence. You're not particularly religious, but you find yourself clinging to purpose. You want to tell the story, you want to see people you care about again, you want to prove that humans can endure. It's thin, but it's something. Your body is in a constant cycle now. Shiver to generate heat, burning calories. Stop shivering as you warm slightly. Temperature drops, shivering resumes. It's exhausting. Your muscles ache from the constant tension. Your jaw hurts from clenching against the cold. Your shoulders are knots of cramped muscle. But the shivering is good. It means your body still has resources to fight, still has calories to burn. When shivering stops, that's when you're in serious trouble. You prepare and drink more snow-melted water, the routine now familiar. The cold liquid in your stomach is unpleasant, but you're beyond caring about comfort. Hydration is a task, a requirement, something you execute because survival demands it. The water sits heavy in your gut, and your body works to warm it, another tax on your dwindling reserves. You think about the people who live through winters here, the Saka and Evenk and Yukigir peoples who have made Yakutia home for thousands of years. They don't think of themselves as superhuman. This is just life, just normal. They have bad winters and good winters, cold days and extremely cold days, but it's all within the range of expected experience. You wonder what they'd think of you. A stranger huddled in a crude snow shelter, unprepared and alone. Would they pity you? Admire your improvisation? Shake their heads at your obvious lack of preparation? There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes in survival situations. You're physically isolated, obviously, but there's also an existential loneliness. The knowledge that you're facing this alone, that no one is coming to save you in the next few hours, that your survival depends entirely on your own resources and decisions. Is profoundly different from everyday loneliness. This is loneliness with stakes, isolation with consequences. You hear another sound, this one real. A sharp crack echoes through the forest, the report of a tree somewhere fracturing in the extreme cold. The sound is startling, breaks your internal reverie. You listen intently, nothing else. Just that one crack, then silence again. The forest itself is suffering. Every living thing stressed by the cold, enduring, waiting for dawn and slightly warmer temperatures. And then you notice something. The darkness inside your shelter has changed quality. It's still dark, but not the absolute, oppressive blackness of deep night. There's a faint, barely perceptible lightning, a suggestion of pre-dawn glow filtering through your ventilation hole. It's so subtle you're not sure if it's real or wishful thinking. You stare at the ventilation hole, trying to decide. Yes, maybe. The darkness is definitely less absolute than it was. Dawn is coming. Not here yet, not even close, but coming. You've survived the night, or most of it anyway. The worst cold is probably past. Temperatures usually reach their minimum in the hours just before dawn, then start climbing as the sun returns. Not that minus 71 degrees Celsius climbing to minus 65 degrees Celsius is particularly encouraging, but it's something. Direction matters. You've been declining all night, fighting entropy, losing the thermodynamic battle slowly. Now, maybe the trend is about to reverse. You allow yourself a moment of something approaching triumph. You built a shelter from nothing. You made fire with frozen wood and numb hands. You stayed hydrated despite having no equipment. You survived night in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, using techniques that humans have refined over millennia. Yes, you're exhausted, calorie depleted, uncomfortable, and not out of danger yet. But you're alive, conscious, cognitive, still fighting. The pre-dawn glow is definitely growing now, unmistakable. The ventilation hole shifts from absolute black to dark gray to charcoal. You can start to make out shapes inside your shelter. The dim outline of the entrance tunnel, the darker shadow where your pine boughs lie. The world is returning, gradually, grudgingly, but definitely returning. You survived the night. Now you have to survive the day. The growing light through your ventilation hole transforms from charcoal to slate gray, and you can finally see the interior of your shelter in dim detail. The walls are glazed with a thin layer of ice from your breath, slightly translucent, catching what little light filters in. Your sleeping platform looks rough and makeshift in the dawn glow. Piles of pine boughs and dead grass that somehow kept you from direct contact with frozen snow all night. The entrance tunnel is a dark throat leading to the outside world, and through it, you can see the faintest suggestion of purple sky. You need to assess your condition honestly, without the cognitive fog of deep night. Toes. Numb but responding when you wiggle them, good, probably no frostbite. Fingers. Same status, cold but functional. Face. The parts you can feel seem okay, though your nose and cheeks are completely numb. Concerning but not immediately critical. Core temperature. Hard to judge, but you're still shivering intermittently, which means you're still above the danger threshold. Mental state. Tired, foggy but coherent. You can do arithmetic, remember facts, make logical decisions. No signs of serious hypothermia-induced confusion. But you're also aware of new problems that the night's endurance has created. You're profoundly exhausted, that deep cellular fatigue that comes from hours of shivering and stress. Your muscles ache from constant tension. Your caloric reserves are significantly depleted. You can feel the hollowness, the weakness that comes from extended fasting combined with extreme energy expenditure. And perhaps most concerning, your motivation is wavering. Part of you just wants to stay here in this shelter, conserve energy, wait for rescue that might never come. The psychological battle is almost harder than the physical one now. You force yourself to move, to conduct an inspection of your shelter from the inside. The walls are solid. The ice glaze has actually strengthened them overnight. The ventilation hole is slightly larger than you remember. Some melting and refreezing probably enlarged it, which is fine. Better too much ventilation than too little. The sleeping platform is compressed but intact. The entrance baffle of pine boughs is frosted over but still functional. Your shelter has performed admirably, honestly better than you had any right to expect from such hasty construction. But you need to make decisions now, and decisions require information. You need to know what the outside conditions are, whether they've improved enough to make travel possible, whether staying here is viable long-term. You need to check your coal carrier to see if you preserved fire overnight. You need to scout for any signs of human activity, smoke from distant settlements, trails, anything that might guide your next move. Crawling out of your shelter into the dawn is like being born into a hostile alien world. The cold hits you instantly, but there's something different about it. It's brutal, yes, but not quite the soul-crushing severity of last night. You'd estimate maybe minus 60 degrees Celsius or minus 65 degrees Celsius. Still lethally cold, but a noticeable improvement. The sky is that peculiar shade of deep purple blue that precedes Arctic sunrise, and the landscape is visible in pre-dawn twilight. Hoarfrost coats everything in crystalline white, and the ice fog from yesterday has cleared somewhat, giving you better visibility. The first thing you check is your coal carrier, that hollowed wood filled with coals and covered with ash. You carefully brush away the ash and moss covering, and yes, there are still live coals inside, glowing faintly orange when you blow gently on them. Fire preserved. This is massive. It means you can restart fire without going through the entire bow drill ordeal again. You carefully feed the coals with fine tinder, blowing steadily, nursing them back to small flames. Within minutes, you have fire again, a small but genuine blaze that you build up with twigs and small branches. The warmth on your face is glorious, painful, wonderful. You hold your hands near the flames, close enough to feel heat, but not so close you'll burn your numb fingers. Sensation returns slowly, agonizingly, that pins and needles feeling that means nerves are waking up. You rotate, warming different sides of your body, trying to distribute the heat benefit. While tending the fire, you scan your surroundings more carefully in the growing light. The forest looks the same. Endless taiga, large trees coated in frost, snow-covered ground undulating in drifts and hollows. But now you're looking for specific things. Signs of human activity, game trails that might lead somewhere, geographical features that might indicate direction. You spot what might be a frozen stream bed about 100 meters away, a slight depression winding through the trees. Streams lead to rivers, rivers lead to settlements. It's not much, but it's something. You also notice tracks in the snow near your shelter. Fox prints, delicate and precise. The Arctic fox came by during the night, probably curious about your scent, maybe hoping you were a food source or had cached something edible. The fox moved on when it found nothing of interest. But the tracks confirm that wildlife is active, which means the ecosystem is functioning, which means there are food sources somewhere in this landscape, even if you can't access them. Here's where you face the critical decision that every survival situation eventually demands. Stay or go. Staying means conserving energy, maintaining your shelter, hoping for rescue or improved conditions. Going means spending precious calories on travel that might lead nowhere, but also might lead to civilization, food, rescue. There's no obviously correct answer, and this is where people often make fatal mistakes, either staying too long and dying of exposure or starvation, or leaving too early and dying of exhaustion and exposure during travel. You weigh the factors. Against staying: no food, limited firewood nearby, no indication anyone knows you're here or is searching for you. For staying: functional shelter that keeps you alive, established fire, some familiarity with the immediate area. Against going: extreme cold makes travel dangerous, you're already calorie depleted, no clear destination or direction. For going: possible settlements downstream if you follow the frozen stream bed. Staying eventually means death from starvation, movement generates heat. Historians still argue whether the traditional advice to stay put and wait for rescue is actually optimal in wilderness survival situations. But modern survival statistics suggest it depends entirely on whether anyone knows you're missing and where to look. If you filed a travel plan, told people your route, and are overdue, staying makes sense. If you're completely off-grid and no one knows you're in trouble, staying is slowly dying. You're not sure which category you fall into. This whole scenario has been deliberately vague on those details, but you suspect nobody's coming to look for you here. You decide on a compromise strategy. You'll prepare for travel but spend today improving your situation and gathering intelligence. You'll use the fire to dry out your clothing, melt and store water if you can find or make containers, rest and recover slightly, scout the immediate area for the best travel route. Then tomorrow at first light, if conditions permit, you'll attempt to follow the frozen stream toward what you hope is human habitation. It's a plan anyway, which is better than no plan. Using the fire, you start addressing your most immediate needs. Clothing first, you take off your outer layers one at a time and carefully dry them by the fire, rotating them to heat all sides without scorching. The moisture that accumulated overnight, from sweat, from breath condensation, from snow contact, steams off, and the clothing regains some of its insulation value. It's remarkable how much warmer properly dried clothing feels. You also heat more stones, preparing to refresh your shelter's thermal mass for one more night. You'll sleep warmer tonight than last night, which will help your body recover. You melt snow and drink copiously, hydrating as much as your stomach will tolerate. Hydration improves everything: cognitive function, physical performance, cold tolerance. It's the one advantage you can maximize. As the sun finally breaks the horizon, a weak, pale disk that provides light but precious little warmth, you stand near your fire and take a mental inventory of what you've accomplished and what still lies ahead. You've survived one night in -71°C conditions using only natural materials and ancient techniques. You've maintained fire, stayed hydrated, avoided frostbite, and kept your cognitive function intact. These are genuine achievements. But the brutal reality is that you're also significantly weaker than you were 24 hours ago. Your caloric reserves are depleted, and the next 24 to 48 hours will determine whether you survive this ordeal or become another cautionary tale. The cold is still extreme, travel will be difficult and dangerous, and you have no guarantee that following the frozen streambed will lead anywhere useful. You feed more wood to your fire, feeling its warmth on your face, and make peace with the uncertainty. You've done everything you can to prepare, to adapt, to survive. Now it's a matter of execution, endurance, and a bit of luck. The shelter that kept you alive through the night stands behind you, a mound of snow with a small dark entrance, simultaneously crude and sophisticated. A testament to human ingenuity and the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of Arctic survival. The Yakutian dawn is beautiful in its harshness. The low-angle sun casting long purple shadows across the snow, the frost-coated trees glittering with ice crystals, the vast frozen silence of the taiga stretching to the horizon. It's the kind of beauty that kills you if you don't respect it, the kind of environment that has shaped human culture and technology for millennia, the kind of place where survival is never guaranteed but always possible for those who understand the rules. You survived the night. You built shelter with bare hands. You made fire from frozen wood. You stayed hydrated in a desert of frozen water. And now, as the weak sun climbs and temperatures slowly increase from lethal to merely dangerous, you prepare for whatever comes next. Because in Yakutia, Survival isn't an event. It's a process, continuous and demanding, requiring constant vigilance and adaptation. The fire crackles softly. The sun rises. The cold persists but feels less absolute than it did in the deep darkness. And you stand there, alive against the odds, ready to face another day in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. And now, let yourself settle deeper into comfort. You've journeyed through the coldest inhabited place on our planet, felt the bite of -71 degrees Celsius air against skin, experienced the profound satisfaction of building shelter from nothing but snow and determination. You've survived night in conditions that would kill most living things, using techniques perfected over thousands of years of human adaptation. As you drift towards sleep now, in your warm bed, in your climate-controlled room, let the contrast wash over you. The security of walls and heating, the luxury of blankets and comfort, these are technologies, gifts from countless generations who figured out how to survive and then how to thrive. You're connected to that long chain of human ingenuity, from the first person who built a snow shelter to stay alive through one more night, to the civilization that allows you to rest easy without fighting for every degree of warmth. Let the images fade. The dark snow cave, the flickering fire, the vast frozen taiga under stars. Let the cold recede into memory, replaced by the comfort of your present moment. You've survived the journey, learned the lessons, felt the weight of endurance. Now you can rest, truly rest, knowing that humans can adapt to almost anything, can survive the seemingly unsurvivable, can build life even in places that seem designed to prevent it. Sleep well. You've earned it. The shelter stands, the fire burns, and dawn has come. All is well. Close your eyes and drift away, warm and safe, carrying the quiet satisfaction of survival into your dreams. Sweet dreams.